Over the course of 2023, G-Kids held Ghibli Fest, where 10 of Studio Ghibli's films were shown in theaters from March to November. In order, the films were My Neighbor Totoro, Ponyo, Kikis Delivery Service, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Castle in the Sky, Princess Mononoke, Porco Rosso, The Wind Rises, Howl's Moving Castle, and finally, Spirited Away. Being that I am a self-proclaimed lover and proponent of animation, I considered it a form of sin that I had not seen any Studio Ghibli film before the festival, save for Princess Mononoke. So I took it upon myself to partake in watching these films and finally understand what the hype is all about. As such, I decided that I'd like to share my thoughts and feelings on each one. Keep in mind, I'm not a film critic or a cinephile, I'm just a guy who likes animation and movies. After watching each film, I would write down my immediate reaction, followed by consuming related video essays and podcasts as a way to help me deepen my understanding of the films. Everything I say here are my own personal thoughts, opinions, and rankings, partially influenced by the ideas of others. These rankings are subjective, of course, and are based on how much I personally enjoyed the film, or what it meant to me, rather than if I believe one to be better than the other, though that may or may not ultimately be the case. I'll be adding in some criticism where I see fit as well. I may have more to say about one film than I do another, as I watched some more recently and remember more about those than I do the ones shown earlier in the year. Consider it some form of recency bias. Additionally, you'll likely hear me repeating myself with a number of things, such as praising the story, the visuals, music, characters, themes, and so on of a particular movie. Lastly, this video will contain spoilers for the aforementioned films, so it's best if you've already seen the films yourself, or at least have some context for what they're about. Keep that in mind moving forward, or if you simply don't care. Without further ado, let's get started with My Neighbor Totoro. Okay, hear me out. I know it's blasphemous to put My Neighbor Totoro at the very bottom. At least let me explain why. Being arguably the most recognizable of the Ghibli films, it stands the test of time and is a fantastic one. The first of the 10 films I'd watched this year, I didn't know anything about this film going in. Seriously, all I knew was that there was a big furry creature named Totoro. That's it. This lack of knowledge beforehand would help give me a lack of expectations. The movie is very cute and wholesome, the kind of movie you can watch when you're feeling down. It's got great vibes. You're never really in a bad mood as you go through it. It's an absolute joy watching Satsuki and Mei explore, run around, play, and enjoy their new home after moving in. You get to see them enjoy themselves in a way that kids would. That's a definite strength of this film. The characters and the way they're characterized. Satsuki and Mei behave and are depicted as children, because they are. The way they run around with boundless energy, the way they go up and down stairs, get upset, cry, throw temper tantrums, and so on. They demonstrate the carefree attitude and joy of a child, especially when Mei discovers Totoro for the first time. I mean, she climbs on top of him and pokes him on his nose. I, for one, would not go and poke a large creature I discovered sleeping in the forest. Also, why does Totoro have human teeth? We all know what happens when we give human teeth to an anthropomorphic creature. I also have to give a shout out to their father, Tatsuo. He's a loving and supportive father, especially with the way he gives the girls space to explore and encourages their curiosity. Another great aspect is the respect this film displays for the environment, animism, and Shinto religion throughout. Like when the girls and their father greet and thank Totoro, or when Satsuki and Mei are caught in the rain and they thank a statue for allowing them to take shelter with it. As with many Ghibli films, the visuals for the movie are great. Lots of wide landscape shots, full of lush green and giant trees. One of my favorite moments is when the girls go with Totoro on his flight. It's astounding, and it definitely reflects Miyazaki's love of flight, capturing the magic and freedom of it. The reason I place this movie at the bottom of the list is that, while enjoyable with a cozy vibe, the movie is just a story. There doesn't seem to be much of a plot, rather a simple sequence of events. We follow the girls as they experience life after moving in, so I suppose you could categorize it as a slice-of-life movie. I've also noticed that the movie lacks an antagonist or a conflict. The only conflict I can really think of is Mei getting lost towards the end of the movie, and the illness of their mother, Yasuko. Like many of the other films, the simple presentation of the film has some dark undertones, namely the girls' struggle against potentially losing their mother. The music is great too. Joe Hisaishi did a wonderful job with the score gently complementing the scenes and simplicity of the royal lifestyle. The movie was funny too. Something that did make me laugh in the theater was a scene when Satsuki is asking Totoro for help, and he grabs her with his hand. Someone in the theater said crunch as he did so, suggesting that he crushed her in his hand. I thought it was pretty funny. I do find the cat bus creepy. I like the character and appreciate that it helps the girls get to the hospital, but still, just the way it smiles, it's just... Overall, this film is a great foray into the Ghibli catalog, full of fantasy and whimsy. It begins on a very light note and ends leaving me with a grin. Yasuko makes it home, and the girls spend all their time with her. I don't think it's my favorite film that I've seen from the list here, but it's wonderful nonetheless. Next, we have The Wind Rises. I had heard good things about this film going into it, and while I did enjoy it, I do have some gripes with the film. But we'll get to that. I appreciate that, unlike most Studio Ghibli films, this one is grounded in reality. It actually takes place in our world, in the early 20th century, following the life of Jiro Horikoshi, designer of the Mitsubishi fighter aircraft, used by the Empire of Japan during World War II. I didn't know that Jiro Horikoshi was a real person. It helps the film feel more grounded than the other ones, which is a nice change. Something that Jiro struggles with the entire time is failure. But his resilience and determination to bring his love of aviation and planes to light is inspiring. The way he tries time and time again, yet fails every single time is devastating to watch, but it's amazing that he just doesn't give up. It's the resilience that inspires me to keep pushing. It reminds me of my own struggles and journey as an artist. The visuals, as always, are wonderful. I think a fantastic depiction of the animation prowess of this film is the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923, early in the film. When the earthquake first hits, and the ground shifts in such a way that can only be done in an animated form, on top of the audio and sound, it's very haunting. Apparently, the audio used during the earthquake was done using actual human beings. The way the earth groans as if in pain freaked me out. I legitimately thought that there was some kind of demon attack going on before I realized that it was just an earthquake. Ugh, beautiful. Another aspect I found compelling is the use of airplanes in the film. This film is certainly a reflection of Miyazaki's love of aviation, and everything that flight can signify. Passion, freedom, and so on. Both Jiro and his idol Giovanni Caproni are aware that their planes are being used for war, violence, and destruction. It's an interesting take on the corruption of ideas, dreams, beauty, and even art, all in the name of advancement in militarism, given the context of the film. Even nowadays, that ideal is still adaptable, namely with the issue of the commercialization of art. That is a whole other conversation, but the nature of which art is commercialized, warped, or created solely for money, profit, or any other capitalist venture is something that I think about. I don't struggle with it as an artist, but it's something that I'm aware of. Another aspect of the film I enjoyed was watching Jiro and Naoko fall in love. The way they first interacted on the train during the earthquake, and how they found each other later on, it's all cute and lovable. However, this leads me to my biggest issue with the movie, Naoko's death. It seemed inevitable that she was going to die, and I felt like I knew she was, but I got really mad when she did. The entire time I was saying, "You better not die on me!" And there are a few things that bug me about her death. For starters, it hits me the most that her relationship with Jiro feels tragic from the very start. She has tuberculosis, and it feels inevitable that she's going to die from there on out, being that the disease, at the time, was incurable. She's an artist who paints, and I despise that she can no longer create art after falling ill. We see her creating a painting where she meets Jiro again, and we don't see her creating any more art afterwards because she's trying to recover. That makes me sad. An artist no longer able to create because she's ill. The way her passion is taken from her just like that. Despite being in a difficult position, I also found myself growing really annoyed with Jiro. He seems to be caught between needing to make these plane designs for his company and job, and taking care of Naoko, which he barely does to begin with. Their rushed marriage, out of fear that Naoko won't recover in time for them to marry, is already stressful enough. But Naoko suffers a lung hemorrhage and recovers at a mountain sanatorium, but then she leaves that to spend time with Jiro. And I get it, she loves him, and she wants to be with him, but despite that, she doesn't feel like a character. And the fact that she dies feels like an example of fridging to me. I feel like it's mostly all in service of Jiro's character. Look, again, he's in a difficult position, but it doesn't entirely sit well with me that there are scenes where Naoko is literally dying next to him, and he's focusing on his planes. It annoyed me because I feel like he should stop what he's doing and take care of his dying wife. And when she does die, she tells him that he must live his life to the fullest. She's portrayed more as this symbol, this pure, almost angelic and tragic figure, rather than a character. It's a little more than frustrating. You may disagree with me, and that's fine, but that's what bothered me following my viewing of this film. Despite that, it's overall a great movie. Wonderful music, great visuals, a good story, but not my favorite of the films, which is why I placed it here. Next is Ponyo. I find this one a little more enjoyable than Totoro. I thought it was really cute. First and foremost, the greatest strength of this movie was the animation. God, the animation. Smooth and wonderful to look at. The characters, especially the eponymous Ponyo and deuteragonist Sosuke, were great. The environments are all well animated. The waves, the trees, the animals, everything. This movie is just great to look at. I'd have to say the strongest example of how wonderful the visuals are is when Ponyo is running on the waves, looking for Sosuke. The way she runs, the way the waves, which are fish in a way, move up and down, ugh, it's so good! Another thing that sits amazingly with me is when Lisa is angry and frustrated that her husband, Koichi, will not be making it home. Sosuke goes and comforts her, and she hugs him. But she does this thing when she's lying on her back and she swings her leg back, then forward to gain momentum to sit up. It's such a simple thing, but I love it. We all do that when we're trying to sit up, and the fact that it's animated so beautifully is phenomenal. The characters are all lovable and great. Sosuke and Ponyo are wonderful, and I love that they have agency, even if they're simple goals. Ponyo wants to find and be with Sosuke, and Sosuke wants to find his mother, and protect and love Ponyo. And what's great is that it's a simple love. Not a complex, romantic, or even sexual love that adults would experience, but the love between Sosuke and Ponyo is young, innocent, and carefree. Lisa is a wonderful mother, one who cares for and fully trusts her son. I love Grandma Mirai, Ponyo's mother. She's beautiful, powerful, and I like that she challenges Fujimoto to think about what Ponyo wants, and whether he is able to allow Ponyo to be independent and pursue what she wants. It's a great way to flesh out his character. And speaking of which, Fujimoto, Ponyo's father, is kind of my favorite character? He's very cynical and misanthropic, in a way that I find funny. I get it though. He dislikes humanity because of its environmental destruction, and honestly, yeah, I get it. We kind of suck. But as a father figure, I like that he's only doing what he does out of a desire to protect Ponyo and maintain a balance, even if it is a little misguided. He seems tired and neurotic, but it's out of a desire to keep things in check. I also find it interesting that he resents humanity, despite being human himself. It adds layers to him. But also, gotta be honest, my man's a Chad. I mean, he got with and married the goddess of mercy and queen of the ocean. Man's got an insurmountable amount of riz. The themes of this film are fantastic. The movie handles the themes of environmentalism and balance well. However, I think the idea of an imbalance between humanity and nature could have been further explored. The whole movie kickstarts because Ponyo gets caught up underneath a fishing trawler, where we see heaps of trash and pollution in the sea. When Ponyo does reunite with Sosuke, the magic she released brings an imbalance, and even the moon is falling out of orbit. But it's not really explored anymore. Ponyo, on her quest to look for Sosuke, essentially brings about a tsunami and ruin to Sosuke's hometown. Everything is freaking flooded! But that leads to another strength of the film, how Sosuke and Ponyo deal with everything, and the wonder of life is reflected through them. I'll put it this way, the kids wake up and everything is flooded. I'd be freaking out, wondering if my mother is okay and so on. But the kids? Nah, they just roll with it, and that's great. It's wonderful to see how they behave like kids. Ponyo especially. The way she runs around, eats her food, observes and interacts with everything in the house. It's cute to watch. The music by Joe Hisaishi, as always, is incredible. My favorites are Deep Sea Pastures, Mother Sea, and Ponyo Rides a Sea of Fish. They really add to the majesty of the ocean, and the magic of this film. All in all, the movie is wonderful. It presents the world with this magical, fantastical, childlike wonder, and it's great to see this little goldfish go on an adventure. After all my praise, This movie is as low as it is because, well, I enjoy the others a bit more on this list. Heading into this film, I had heard that it was really good. A friend of mine even told me that she's seen this one tons of times, and I gotta say, it was fantastic. Admittedly, while many of these films do have strong themes and messages, this one left me feeling a little confused towards the end. Though, consuming video essays pertaining to the film, as I usually do, did help me understand the themes of self-love, war, and age. For starters, the film is very anti-war, as some of Miyazaki's films tend to be. Though it's not at the forefront of the film. You definitely see it in the back, with the tanks and warships and propaganda. I appreciate that it adds to the world building. Heck, even one of the characters, Turnip Head, turns out to be the missing prince of the enemy kingdom, Justin, which is the main reason Sophies Kingdom is at war. Though, the anti-war and pacifist nature of the film is something worth noting. The movie is adapted from the book of the same name. In the book, the war is not really at the forefront or even a major concern of the story, unlike the film. This is because, from what I know, Miyazaki was compelled to include anti-war and pacifist themes after his anger regarding the United States' invasion of Iraq in 2003. These themes are definitely present, with the war in the background, and Hal's persistent refusal to report to the nations he lives under to serve, and his active efforts to sabotage warships. Let's move on to some lighter stuff. The visuals are incredible, especially the quiet scenes when the camera would pan across massive fields of green, lakes, and the sky. I loved the scenes where you see Hal's castle moving. The way you see all these moving parts, the way it walks on its chicken-like legs, the steam, it's all so incredible. Calcifer and his movements, the way he's animated, are awesome. Hal's dramatic temper tantrum is awesome, the way the green slime falls off him, along with his summoning of the shadow spirits. And don't even get me started on the scene when Hal cooks breakfast with Sophie. God, the way the bacon and eggs look, the way it's all cooked, food doesn't even look that good in real life. Alongside that, even the character designs are awesome. The Witch of the Waste, in all her bulbous mass, worked well. Hal's wardrobe is really good. It complements him. He's also unfairly handsome and attractive, and that gets me mad. Save some for the rest of us. Sophie's attire, whether she's young or old, is simple but effective. It's all in service of her character. Speaking of character, the characters in their arcs are interesting. A major theme of the movie is self-love, and I struggle to understand that at first. It's not entirely there for me, but I can see it. The Witch of the Waste cursing Sophie by turning her into a 90-year-old woman serves as a catalyst for her, as it allows her to develop her own agency and worry less about her looks, being that she was insecure about her appearance. Which, by the way, Sophie, what are you talking about? You were beautiful even with silver hair and have an English accent, madam, I ask. Again, what are you talking about? The idea of old age is also presented in the film nicely. Sophie doesn't seem to be worried at all about her sudden transformation. She takes it in stride, as a matter of fact, and feels that she can use this opportunity to seek out what she wants. She seems to have more energy and agency when she's this old woman. She definitely reacts better than I would if I were in that situation. By extension, her appearance reflects how she feels about herself. When she's at her most confident, she returns to her younger self, like when she's talking to Solomon about Hal. The way self-love is presented through her struggle is cool. The theme of compassion and old age is also greatly portrayed through Sophie. I think it's a great character strength of hers when she decides to take in and help the Witch of the Waste, after the latter loses her powers and she becomes a simple old woman. Heck, even when the two of them were struggling up the steps towards the king's palace, Sophie waits for her. Trust me, if I were Sophie and I met the person who cursed me, I'd definitely dropkick them towards the bottom. Regarding old age, I liked how the film presents older people. This is a general statement, so take it with a grain of salt, but I feel that older people are seen as less useful to society at large. So when Sophie becomes older, I think it's nice that she sees it as a chance to really live for herself, to do what she wants. She even decides to help Hal as his cleaning lady. The movie could be really funny too, especially when it came to Calcifer. His lines, delivery, and dialogue were great. He's such a sassy dork, but he's reliable. And learning that he's voiced by the same guy who voiced Mike Wazowski is fantastic. The music is top-notch, especially the main theme, Promise of the World, Merry-Go-Round of Life. The music feels grand, fantastical, and beautiful. It all adds to the presentation of the film. Despite everything I liked about this movie, I did feel confused. I struggled a bit to really understand what it's about, so to speak. Not that every Ghibli film needs to be about something, but I struggled a bit to grasp what it's trying to say. At first, I felt like it was a simple love story. The film does feel a little cluttered. It's trying to say a whole bunch of stuff, from pacifism, self-love, compassion, old age, and so on. I feel if the film had focused on just two things, it could have benefited from it. Something I found a little odd was Sophie's love for Hal. She falls in love with him as the movie progresses, but it feels weird to me when she's having that nightmare about Hal in his giant pigeon form, and she wants to help him, and proclaims that she loves him. I thought to myself, do you? I mean, you barely know the guy. Sure, he's hot, but do you really know him? I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but it feels a little empty. Her love for him, I mean. But it's not really enough for me to harp on the film. It's fantastic through and through. The only thing I knew about Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind going in was that the protagonist's name is Nausicaa, she rides a glider, wields a rifle, and that's it. I didn't know anything going into this film, but that's for the better in my opinion. The film was different in a way that felt refreshing. I liked that it took place in the future, rather than, say, a familiar or modern setting like Totoro or Ponyo. I think the world is very interesting, from the toxic jungle to the various nations that surround it. I think it's neat that, despite the story taking place in the future, the various nations each contain details or technology that we today would describe as old, such as knight armor or archaic looking rifles. I did some reading after the film, and apparently it adapts the first 2 volumes or 16 chapters of the manga, so I feel like it would do me good to read that, since it would help with further exploration of its themes and world building. The themes of environmentalism, technological annihilation, and pacifism are definitely present throughout the film. Nausicaa and her endeavors to have everyone respect nature and the Great Ohm are fun to watch, especially as it services the plot. Seeing her efforts and struggles to establish peace between her valley and the Tolmekians makes her a strong and lovable character. She feels very complex and nuanced. She's a princess, but definitely takes action when necessary, even if she makes mistakes. She's a tough fighter, but loving, empathetic, and peaceful. I also enjoy that the film draws upon some religious inspiration, with the way Nausicaa fulfills the savior prophecy of her nation. She's a great leader too. Ugh, she's such a badass. I also like Princess Kushana. She's tough and brutal, but I like that she challenges Nausicaa and pushes her to achieve her goal. I thought the film was pretty funny too. Well, wouldn't want it to be. It helped lighten the mood during this otherwise serious film. A funny moment was when Lord Yupo was interrogating Kushana and a boy came in with news, but cannot enter without a password. He chastises the boy stopping him, and then gives him the password anyway. Little moments like those were pretty cool. Something that stood out to me was the design of the airships, especially the one that crashed into the Valley of the Wind at night. Its large size and colors reminded me of the concept art for the Divine Beasts from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That's all I can say about the film. I would say more, but I do think I need to read the manga to further appreciate this film. I just might honestly, but for the time being, it sits here at the midway point of the list. Porco Rosso is certainly different from most of the other films I've seen on this list. For starters, it's definitely shorter, but it's nice and compact, being only 94 minutes. I do appreciate that, underneath its historical and political backdrop, this movie is about a man coping with grief, who rediscovers his humanity and learns to forgive himself, look forward and move on, which I think is a story that can be fantastic if executed correctly. Visually speaking, this film is gorgeous, and I love the scenes of flight, the sky and landscape soaring by, or when the film takes a quiet approach and quietly shows what it wants to show. As with other Ghibli films, this film is lighthearted and fun. There's a lot of humor, which I appreciate, especially with the sea pirates. A part that genuinely made me laugh was when the Sea Pirates gang positioned themselves to take a photo with Fio, and then their leader, Capo, knocked everyone off so that it was just him. That's the definitive strength of the film, the humor. The dialogue and visual humor is astounding, sprinkled all throughout, which helps soften the otherwise serious atmosphere of a character living in a nation descending into a totalitarian regime. A strength of this film was that it took place in our world. It has a real historical context, taking place after World War I in the late 1920s. Normally, Ghibli films are all about these far-off, fantastical, and amazing worlds, providing a gateway into an escape from our world. But the fact that this takes place in and around real-world Italy grounds the film, offering a different way to tell a story. Though it's not entirely realistic. There are elements of fantasy and magic, primarily with Porco. I mean, he's a man with a literal head of a pig. Porco Rosso's greatest strength, I feel, is its story. From the get-go, Porco makes it very obvious that he flies alone, and has to learn to appreciate others and regain his humanity. Porco has a sort of redemption arc in a way. His biggest struggle is learning to forgive himself for the death of his friends and brothers in arms in combat. Beautifully shown in the scene when Porco passes out and is flying above the clouds. He spends the entire film isolating himself from others because he feels that he doesn't deserve any goodness or happiness. But he comes around to it. With Fio and Gina's help, he learns to forgive himself, accept what has happened, and move forward with his life. His whole silent, brooding shtick is clearly a result of his grief and survivor's guilt, but he accepts that it was not his time to die, and that he has to learn to live with his life. Additionally, another demonstration with his growth is his learning to accept the help of others, especially women. I mean, he isn't exactly subtle with his sexism, even if it was more accepted at the time this movie takes place. Fio and her family, with their ability and efficiency with working on planes, put him in his place, which was a great way for him to grow as a character. Fio and Gina were great characters too. I like that this film was all about Fio proving that she is more than capable of being a competent engineer. Young, tough, energetic, and passionate, she's lovable. A great character. I also saw the passion of an artist in her, especially with the scene where she stayed up all night working on the schematics for Porco's new plane. Man, to be young and full of energy again. Working in a field that is, as far as I know, not historically known to have included women, Fio shows her worth and carries her weight. She loves something and puts in the work to pursue and hone her craft. I also love how she doesn't take no for an answer, and can be a little reckless, but that makes her all the more lovable. Though, I was not a big fan of the running jokes of people fawning over her, especially the sea pirates and Curtis. These are grown men, and she's 17. It felt very gross and weird, especially with Curtis wanting to marry her, right after just seeing her for the first time. I also didn't like when Fio kissed Porco, because in my head, she doesn't really know him all that well. Though I'll acknowledge that I'm viewing this through the lens of a 21st century young adult. It felt a little out of place, at least to me. Even so, it didn't diminish my enjoyment of the film. Gina too is really fantastic. Beautiful, successful, strong-willed, yet still delicate. I like that she's also part of the reason Porco learns to accept things and move on. She knows what she wants. She knows she loves Porco and is willing to wait for him, even in the midst of all this grief and loss with her previous husbands who have all died as pilots. She's not afraid to put Porco, or Curtis, in their place either, and I think that makes her great. I love her. She's so beautiful. Listen, if Porco doesn't want her and is gonna keep her waiting, then I'll take her. I know nothing of planes, but I can appreciate that this film is a love letter to aviation, and also exhibits the wonder and beauty of planes, juxtaposed against their use in war and combat, which is an idea that was explored in The Wind Rises. It shows both sides of it, which reminds me of how Miyazaki can show both the good and bad side of something in his films, like technology, nature, or in this one, planes. Porco Rosso is fantastic, though I didn't place it any higher because I would have liked the film to explore Porco's journey a bit more, especially with him coming to terms with his guilt and rediscovering his humanity. This is present in the film, but it's more like subtext rather than a primary theme. And, always remember, better to be a pig than a fascist. Next, we have Castle in the Sky. Like many on this list of films, I went into Castle in the Sky knowing absolutely nothing. All for the better, admittedly. A fantastic film through and through. I thought the atmosphere of this film was really well put together. It wasn't until after I watched the film and did a small amount of research that I realized the film is known for its steampunk aesthetic. I didn't realize that going in, though that's certainly because of my lack of familiarity with the style. I enjoyed the characters, feeling that they were very strong. Shida and Pazu were great, especially with how they bounced off of one another. Not only did they have a strong dynamic, but I love that they actively moved the plot forward. What was funny to me was that, when I first saw Shida, I thought, hey, she looks just like Kiki, but with long pigtails. Which, I mean, yeah, just look at them. I especially thought this when she first spoke with Pazu, as her dress looks just like Kiki's, and later on in the film when Muska shot off her pigtails. It was funny to me. Dola and her gang were really cool too. I liked how Dola, despite being an antagonist for part of the film, was layered and showed some character and sympathetic qualities. She was strong and determined, but showed she could also be soft and caring when she needed to. She's not entirely malicious, she's just doing what she wants. Her gang, or children, were really funny too. I like that they provided a lot of the comic relief in the film, especially during the scene when Sheeta was cooking their food and they all come to help her in an attempt to get close to her, only for each of them to find that the others had the same idea. It got a good laugh out of me, even if it did have some creepiness to it, like the sea pirates with Fio and Porco Rosso. All in all, they're a great group of characters, and the fact that they actually help Sheeta and Pazu in the end really makes me love them more. I do enjoy that in Ghibli films, when an initially antagonistic character or group eventually comes to aid the protagonists. I also enjoyed seeing how this movie inspired later pieces of media, more than just with its steampunk aesthetic, like the airships in some Final Fantasy games, and how the robots inspired the golems from Minecraft. As of writing this sentence, I haven't gotten that far in the game, but I also saw how Laputa could have served as inspiration for the Sky Islands in Tears of the Kingdom. Something I wasn't expecting either was how dark and mature this movie was. Albeit indirectly, this movie is not afraid to depict people dying, or at least depict the implication of death. For example, when Muska dropped all the army men from Laputa, they all just died, I'm sure. Also, Muska, his men, and even his army, all opened fire on Sheeta and Pazu, who are just children. Heck, even in the throne room, Muska was pointing a gun at Sheeta, fully intent on killing her, even firing and removing her pigtails. She's barely a teenager! That's crazy! It reminds me of The Incredibles, and how fully grown men showed no restraint and intended on murdering Violet and Dash. Wasn't expecting that at all, but it's definitely there, which gives the movie a very serious, darker, grounded atmosphere, which I love. Additionally, the exploration of the idea of Laputa and its destructive potential is interesting. Similar to the depiction of planes in Porco Rosso and The Wind Rises, I love it when a piece of media depicts the duality of a particular thing, something that can both create beauty and destruction. It's no wonder that this film has such a large and lasting legacy, with its legacy shown in a wide range of media. I don't really have much more to say about this film, I just really enjoyed it. Ah yes, Spirited Away, the proclaimed best one of Miyazaki's pantheon. Some of you may consider it blasphemous that this isn't at the top spot of my list, but let me at least defend this position. I went into this film with a lot of cautious optimism, since I had heard nothing but high praise for this film, and whenever I consume media I've heard nothing but praise for, I fear that it raises my expectations too high, and therefore leaves me a little disappointed. It happened with Xenoblade Chronicles, Nier Automata, and Chainsaw Man. Sure, I enjoyed them, but it didn't live up to the so-called peak fiction that I had heard them described as. Regardless, I went in knowing nothing of the film, and I can say Spirited Away was a very fantastic film. There was so much about it that resonated with me. Visually, the movie was absolutely beautiful. The architecture, the character designs, the scenery accompanying the quiet moments, it was beautiful. I loved the animation of the film. Things like No Face's movements when he was in his monstrous, bulbous form, the scene of Chihiro going through the flower field with Haku, Yababa's movements, the dirt and grime coming from the river spirit in the bathhouse, everything. I also loved the little small details scattered throughout the film, like Chihiro tapping her toes when she puts on her shoes, or the visual sensation of chills when the river spirit gives her money covered in mud in her hand. Everything. I also appreciated things like Yubaba's appearance. She has a big ol' head that I found to be a bit ugly, but not in a bad way. Her wrinkles and huge head are all animated smoothly and in a way that gives her visual character, if that makes sense. It's all so beautiful and well animated. The implementation of Shinto influence on the film is astounding too. It adds to the world building of the film and helps it feel more lively. The movie is funny too, as a number of these films are. Small visual gags, such as Bo as a mouse imitating Chihiro when she squashed Zeniba's little curse worm, No Face saying "excuse me" after throwing up a bit chasing Chihiro through the bathhouse, or the soot sprites all dropping the coal on themselves when they saw that Chihiro would help them. It was great. I love the characters. Yubaba is really well animated, like I said, and I love that Chihiro goes through a journey. At first, I found her to be kind of annoying with how whiny she was. But, I mean, she's 10 years old. So of course she's gonna be whiny, ungrateful, and a little spoiled, especially with the fact that she's an only child. But then she gets isekai'd and suddenly she's in the spirit world, where she has to work to survive and find a way to turn her parents back into humans. Which, I will say, is a completely horrifying thing to witness. Can you imagine being 10 and witnessing your parents turn into pigs right before your eyes? It's wild! But, as she works and gains the help of others, like Lin, Haku, Kamaji, Yubaba, and Zeniba, she becomes more confident and sure of herself. I was genuinely happy to see Chihiro triumph over her obstacles, like when she managed to clean the stink spirit. I found myself grinning to see her win. By the end, when she says that she can handle going to her new school and environment, I believed it, after watching her grow as a person. How she went from cowering and curling up in a ball when she was scared, barely able to walk down a flight of stairs, to going on a small adventure all for her friend is a joy to witness. No Face, being the one character I knew of the film going in, was not what I was expecting. I didn't realize he would straight up eat people and become this horrific monster. But his actions and demeanor are all because he's lonely and wants a friend, which leads into the themes of this film. This film is very thematically rich, and I found that it touches upon a number of things, like consumerism, greed, labor, identity, love, and environmentalism. For starters, the idea of having power over someone if you can control their name is interesting. The way Yubaba has figurative and literal control over Chihiro when she changes her name to Sen is cool from a storytelling perspective, and it makes sense. A person's name is tied to their identity, and if you control that, you control them. Labor is shown to be a thing that provides, but also strips people of their identity, compassion, and humanity. Chihiro, existing in an alien world, needs someone to help her through it, and when she needs a job, none of the workers, barring Lin, want her. They discriminate against her for being human, and only really show her any affection when she brings about success by cleaning the river spirit. Which is to say, only when it's convenient for them. That reminds me of my retail days, when I found myself growing bitter and resentful towards customers because I despised my job, barely made any money, and was only there because I had bills to pay. Again, another aspect of the labor that resonated with me is how it strips people of their identity. Haku has been at the bathhouse for so long he doesn't remember his original name. Chihiro begins to forget her name too, until she's reminded by the little card her friend gave her. Her work there begins to strip her of her identity. Going back to my experiences, I feel like there's a part of my identity I've lost due to work. Having to do nothing but work long hours for minimal pay really takes its toll when you don't have time for your passions. In my case, my artistic pursuits. I can't do the things I want to do for as long as I'd like to, and it makes me feel like I've lost a part of who I am. I've forgotten my name. Anyways, the theme of compassion is another thing that stuck out to me. The scene of Haku giving Chihiro a rice ball, and she begins to cry as she eats it almost broke me. She's been through so much up until that point, and a small act of kindness such as that overwhelmed her. I almost cried. It showed just how much a little act of kindness can go. And then there's No Face. He's a strange character, but he's also just lonely. You see his behavior through the film and you realize that he desires companionship, and the reason he helps and pursues Chihiro is because she's the only one who showed him any compassion. Granted, it's hard to say whether or not they're actually friends towards the end of the film. I don't think they are, but her willingness to help him despite him eating people is noteworthy. He produces all this gold because the attention it brings him from the bathhouse workers makes him think that this will help him feel wanted. But they're really only doing it for the gold. Chihiro, however, acknowledges him. She lets him into the bathhouse, briefly talks to him on occasion, heals him by feeding him the medicine, and leads him out of the bathhouse. She demonstrated compassion towards him. He wants a friend, and his actions towards Chihiro when she rejects the gold are understandable, to a degree, when he begins to base his entire worth on her, but retaliates when she doesn't satisfy this longing for him. I mean, she even asks him, "What do you want?" I feel like No Face can be an interesting character study on the potential dangers of individuals who go to extreme lengths to satisfy their loneliness or something they lack, if that makes sense. And as always, the music by Joe Hisaishi is fantastic. One Summer Day, Reprise, and Always With Me are wonderful standouts that really add to the atmosphere and the tone of the film. Though, The Sixth Station is incredible due to its use in the train scene, when Chihiro and No Face are headed to look for Zeniba. That scene is so good, as many people have pointed out, because nothing happens, and it demonstrates Miyazaki's use of or nothing. Miyazaki believes that a movie or story needs their quiet moments, and that they can't just be all tense or action. The story needs a moment to slow down and reflect, which is exactly what Chihiro does on the train. She reflects, and we reflect with her, on everything that's happened. We see the beautiful scenery, and we just relax. It's wonderful. Oh, one other thing. During the film, I would listen to Lin speak and thought to myself, you know, Lin's voice sounds familiar. Who is that? Okay, she's voiced by Susan Egan, who voiced Megara in Hercules, okay, Rose Quartz in Steven Universe, and Madam Gina, let's go, baby! Welcome back, my queen! How are you? Is Porco around? He's not flying around still, is he? He better be taking good care of you, because so help me, if he isn't, I'm gonna smack some sense into him. All I'm saying is, I'm not a pilot, so I'm not gonna go off and get myself killed. I work full-time and know how to cook somewhat, so I'm reliable and I take good care. All in all, this movie is wonderful and fantastic. I can see why people consider it Miyazaki's magnum opus, and why it won an Academy Award. I can see its strengths. But there are two other movies that I love just a bit more. Two films that do it a bit more for me. Kikis Delivery Service is a movie that means a lot to me. This movie has a lot going for it. For me, it was really cute, heartwarming, funny, visually beautiful, and artistically poignant. Kiki's a great character, determined, passionate, and actively wanting to grow up and be independent. Her journey is really what makes this movie for me. I liked Gigi a lot too. His sarcastic, dry, and straightforward remarks provided a lot of the humor for me. It wasn't just their dynamic that made the film funny. A lot of the visual humor worked too. I remember laughing out loud when Kiki visits Ursula, and the latter says that she knows a way Kiki can repay her for fixing up the cat doll she lost earlier, and then it hard cuts to Kiki cleaning the floor. It's fantastic. I thought the world of Koriko was great too. So many lovely and nice people. From Osono to Tambo. Well, really, just those. Everyone else was kind of blech. I'd say my favorite was Ursula, as she was an artist. As with many Ghibli films, I appreciated the small animated details that the movie exhibits. Some of the ones that come to mind are Kiki slipping and nearly falling over when she's running, when she hides from Osono's husband after her first morning staying with them, or when she slides down the hill when she begins to lose her powers. It's small things like that that really make this film for me. Those moments take less than a second of screen time, but they make the characters feel so real and lively. The music was also great. Joe Hisaishi did a phenomenal job with the score, as always. On a Clear Day, the first piece in the soundtrack, is so beautifully done. The music sounds and feels so homey and warm, if that makes sense. It really encompasses the sensation of someone wanting to grow up and experience the world. Though, I think my favorite aspect of the movie was Kiki's struggle with losing her powers. The only thing I knew about this movie going in was the idea that the film would touch upon burnout, and it did. The moment that really hit me was when Kiki was sitting on the bench with Tambo, and she said that flying used to be fun until she started doing it for a living. It reminded me of my own artistic fears, and my reluctance to pursue a job in art, for fear of burnout. Is it something that I'm capable of doing? Sure. Absolutely, but I know myself well enough to understand that I don't want to compromise my love and passion for art by simply turning it into something that I have to do. When I was in college, there was not a single semester where I wasn't burnt out halfway through. I lost my passion and love for writing, fiction, and art. I was tired of having to do nothing but write papers and create art solely for a grade, rather than my own desire to do so. There was a moment in my senior year of college when I was taking constructive feedback from a fellow art major for a particular art project. I don't remember what it was, but I remember that he told me, "I see this constant idea in your work, because I know you struggle a lot with making something you want to be making versus something you feel you need to be making." And he was right. Even to this day, that's a strong contention of mine when it comes to any creative process I'm engaged in. As such, I've decided that I don't want a job relating to art. I'm afraid if my hobby becomes my job, I'll grow to resent it. And what am I if not happy creating art for the sake of creating art and having fun? Watching Kiki struggle with adulthood, despite still being a young teenager, is so relatable and wonderful to play out. I feel that she embodies a lot of us when we were her age. We're all so young and energetic and hopeful and eager to become adults. We think that being older means that we're free to do what we want, to follow what makes us happy. Sure, there's some truth to that, but Kiki quickly learns that it's not that easy. She's ready to help the people of Kuriko as their witch, but they mostly ignore her. She then has to find a job and realizes that she doesn't have a lot of money after buying groceries. Then she feels alone and gets really busy working and doesn't have time to do other things, like meeting kids her age, like Tombo. It's sad to see her on her first day in Kuriko, sitting at the park, alone. She's barely making it by, she's not having fun, and she realizes that this adulthood thing, this being a grown witch, isn't what she thought it would turn out to be. Then she starts to really struggle. She makes a delivery to a snobby girl who is incredibly unappreciative. She gets sick, she grows insecure at her witch's attire, and isolates herself when she's hanging out with Tombo and her friends show up. And then Kiki loses her powers, can no longer fly, and loses her ability to understand Gigi, and she understandably feels depressed. Her whole identity is tied to her being a witch, so when she loses what makes her a witch, she begins to struggle with an identity crisis. Again, I've struggled with that. I struggle with my art in a lot of ways, and I genuinely cannot imagine myself as someone who isn't an artist, and I wonder that too. Who am I if I don't have my art? It's so poignant and relevant, and you really feel for Kiki. But then Ursula, who's such a great friend, helps her through the burnout. She tells her that she needs to find her own inspiration, that she needs to learn and discover why she wants to fly, and why she wants to be a witch. It's wonderful. Ursula is wonderful. She just takes Kiki away from her place to her cottage in the woods, as a little vacation. She helps Kiki by helping her rest. We need more people like Ursula. As an artist myself, that really spoke to me. I actually spent some time thinking to myself, why do I make art? Why do I do the things that I do? What is it about my artistic dreams and desires that make me want to pursue them? Ursula demonstrates, aside from being such an awesome friend, an essential component of every artist's journey. The necessity of rest, taking care of oneself, and finding one's inspiration and purpose, which can be something even non-art related. We see this when Kiki helps one of her customers with cleaning and baking. Heck, even Ursula struggled with her own art, but found inspiration when Kiki showed up. She's going through the journey too! It's wonderful! An artist cannot continually churn out work. I mean, they can, yeah, but they have to rest. I have to rest. I can't constantly make stuff and then not take care of myself. Sometimes it's really important to take a step back and do something else. For me, it's watching movies, playing video games, or reading. Maybe going for a walk, going to a nearby park, and so on. It's about living life and having fun when one makes art. Granted, Kiki's art, which is her ability to fly, is her job, so it's tied to her income, but you get what I mean. I also want to give Osono a shout out for helping Kiki by giving her space to find her spark again and taking her in and giving her a job. No one paid her any mind, but Osono did, and she's fantastic. When it comes to proving herself and demonstrating her ability, Kiki steps up to the plate. She rescues Tombo from the falling blimp and learns to fly again, though she doesn't regain the ability to talk to Gigi. It demonstrates that she's matured and grown as a person, but that doesn't mean things go back to the way they were before. She's on her own now, in a way, without Gigi, but she's learned how to take care of herself, and she found her purpose as a witch. It's amazing. It shows that growth and maturity as a person, as an adult, comes with sacrifices, but that will be better for it. An amazing film, and definitely up there as one of my favorites. It speaks to me on so many levels, and it inspires me as an artist. But, despite my love for the film, Kiki's delivery service is number 2 on my list. Meaning I love one of the movie a little bit more than this one. And that movie is Princess Mononoke. You never forget your first. I have a funny history with this movie, as Princess Mononoke was my first ever Ghibli film. I was a child when I first saw it. This year was my 3rd time watching it, because the scene when Ashitaka took a guy's arms off during the opening battle triggered my squeamishness, and I could not handle it afterwards. So I stopped. I just didn't finish the movie. Later on, I watched it again during the summer of 2018 when I was on my college campus for an internship. I handled it much better this time and was able to watch it to the end. Now that I'm old enough to really take it in, man, this movie is a lot more mature, graphic, and violent than I remember. And it's better for it. Compared to the other movies on this list, this one has a darker approach to storytelling, and that lifts it up for me. Now, That's not to say that just because something is darker means that it's better than something lighthearted, like Ponyo. I tend to appreciate something that has a more mature approach to its story. But seriously, wow, this movie is dark. There's blood, death, violence, gore, maybe some elements of horror too? It's crazy. All throughout the film you see people enacting violence on others, people being beheaded and losing limbs, shooting with guns, killing animals. It's a lot, but it's not excessive, and I think that's important. Though, it adds context to the overall atmosphere and contributes to world building. I like that this movie takes place in our world, during the Muromachi period, but with fantasy elements. The plot is so fantastic, everything leads to the next, and it all makes sense. Lady Uboshi shot the boar god, which then attacked Ashitaka's village, leading to his curse, prompting him to seek a cure, where he runs into San, comes into contact with Irontown, learns of Lady Uboshi's plans, and gets involved. It's all so good. The characters are all fantastic too. Ashitaka is a strong protagonist, and his actions actively move the plot forward. It's a simple start. He gets cursed, so he goes west in search of a cure. I think it shows his character that he accepts his fate from the curse in his arm so readily at the start of the movie. Sure, it sucks and it forces him to leave his village, but the fact that he encounters San in Irontown and even the forest spirits and decides to help them, despite his numbered days, is quite noble. He initially doesn't want to get involved in any fight he comes upon, but he does so when needed. San, too, is great. Strong, steadfast, and a little scary. She's just looking out for herself, for her wolves in the forest. And her misanthropy? Relatable. She's witnessed the destruction of the forest firsthand. That's her home. She's only doing what she can to protect it. Though, she's a little misguided too, but it adds depth to her character. I also like Lady Eboshi. She's another example of strong, competent women in Miyazaki's work, whether it be a protagonist or antagonist. She's confident, capable, steadfast, and secure. A force to be reckoned with for sure. The fact that she wants to commit deicide for the good of her own people at the expense of the forest around her is something else too. Like, dang ma, you ain't scared of no god? I wouldn't want to mess with her. It adds a layer of complexity to our antagonist without it feeling forced, since she and her people just want to survive. It makes me love her so much, and the greater conflict she's a part of. But I'll touch on that in a little bit. I also appreciate the depiction of gender in this film. There are many themes to discuss, but how gender was portrayed was cool. The women in Irontown are portrayed as competent and strong, taking part in the physical labor to keep their home up and running, without losing any aspects of their femininity. I love the scene where they're helping keep the furnace moving to produce iron, but they flirt with Ashitaka. Though, it's also nice that they're shown doing what they do without putting down the men around them. Sure, they tease and berate them, but not in a way that feels condescending or misandrous. They're doing what they have to do to survive, whether it be taking up arms or helping melt the iron ore. That and lepers. The lepers are shown working for Lady Eboshi, designing and refining the guns she intends to use. A group of people who would normally be outcast are put to work, albeit in a separate area, giving them purpose. It demonstrates what an amazing character Lady Eboshi is. She took two groups of historically oppressed people, women who worked in brothels and lepers, and gave them a purpose. She helps empower them and give them a better position in their lives, adding complexity to her character. Ashitaka and San oppose her, but she's an active player in the betterment of the lives of those under her. Still, Lady Eboshi is morally grey at best, and has certainly done some questionable things, but we cannot deny that she's a fantastic leader and antagonist. Visually speaking, like any other Ghibli film, this movie is fantastic. The long stretches of green, brown, and silver are used prominently throughout the film, and I love the very iconic scene of Ashitaka riding Yakul in the beginning of the film. And the way the forest spirit looks when it loses its head and takes on its Nightwalker form, or even when it appears for the first time. Ugh, it's all so beautiful. The music was phenomenal too. The Legend of Ashitaka gives me chills. And the music all throughout the film really add to the majesty of the story. My favorites are Requiem, the Tatara Woman Work Song, Princess Mononoke theme song, San and Ashitaka in the Forest of the Deer God, the ending version of The Legend of Ashitaka, and Ashitaka and San. The flutes, drums, and strings accentuate the fast-paced action scenes, or the slow, more thoughtful moments. The main theme of the film is iconic for a reason, and it stuck with me hearing it so often before each of these films were shown. Joe Hisaishi always does a fantastic job, and I think this is among his best. Going back to what I said about the film being mature, it's definitely most evident in its themes. There are so many, but the most prominent one being the environment and humanity's impact on it. The film shows that while humanity takes from the earth an act that is not inherently evil or malevolent, when it does so maliciously, like Lady Eboshi does, the earth and environment grow angry and eventually incur their wrath. Even that itself, wrath, anger, and hatred, are themes that manifest themselves in the actions of the characters, such as the animal gods hating and desiring to kill humans, or San wanting to kill Eboshi, and so on. The themes are all intertwined with the film's plot, and drive it forward, and the characters are influenced by them. Ashitaka demonstrates to do what is right, with eyes unclouded by hate. It's great. There are so many strong themes of the film that lead to a ton of interpretations, and this leads into another aspect of the film that makes it the absolute best for me: the conflict between the characters and how they oppose each other. A prominent strength of the film is its demonstration that no one side is wholly innocent. There is no good and evil. There are only factions who oppose each other. Ashitaka is looking for a cure for his curse that will inevitably kill him. San fights to protect her land from encroaching humans. The animals of the forest fight the humans for their destruction of the environment. Lady Eboshi and the people of Irontown destroy the land, resist the samurai, and seek to kill the forest spirit for their safety. These are all groups and people who are pursuing their goals. They're not evil or malicious, but they commit violence and fight the others because their goals oppose one another. They're just trying to survive. And I want to be clear, I love when a story does that, when it depicts opposing groups or factions who have clashing views. It reminds me of another piece of media that I adore. I'm gonna go on a related tangent, so bear with me. Have you heard of Kid Icarus Uprising? Kid Icarus Uprising, released on the Nintendo 3DS in 2012, is an underappreciated masterpiece. An action-packed game that's funny, has an incredible soundtrack, amazing characters, and a crazy amount of technical and gameplay depth. It was directed by Masahiro Sakurai, the creator of the Kirby and the Super Smash Bros. Series. In the story, you play as Pit, the servant of Palutena, the goddess of light, as they attempt to stop Medusa after her resurrection and attempt to conquer the world. About a third of the way into the game, skip this timestamp if you don't want to be spoiled for the game, Medusa is defeated, but it's shown that Hades, the ruler of the underworld, is the actual main threat of the game. He spreads a wish about a wish-granting seed, and humanity goes to war with itself in search of it. This prompts Verity, the goddess of nature, to intervene. She's angered by both Palutena's, and by extension, humanity's, and Hades' army's destruction of the earth, and views humanity as a disease. So, she starts dropping reset bombs on humanity, which are nuclear weapons that turn into forests. So, you have Pit and Palutena's army protecting humanity from Hades and his forces, who seek to kill as many humans as possible for their souls to strengthen and grow his army, while also facing off against Verity and her forces of nature, who attack both Palutena and Hades' armies for their mutual destruction of the earth. Masahiro Sakurai said that he wanted to avoid portraying a simple good versus evil story, but instead strove to depict the various factions fighting each other due to their clashing views. To bring it back to Princess Mononoke, it's another piece of media I love where it demonstrates the same style of storytelling. There are no true good or evil sides in Princess Mononoke, only sides with clashing views. And that's what makes this movie so good. It adds depth and complexity to the story in a way that grounds it, makes it believable. Because even in real life, whether big or small, conflicts are almost never really entirely black and white, but many are gray with context and nuance. Ugh, man, this movie is so good. I also appreciate that there are moments of humor scattered throughout the film, which prevents the movie from taking itself too seriously, such as the women in Irontown flirting with Ashitaka, or making fun of their husbands. There's even visual humor, like when the wolves started biting Ashitaka's head after he fell off after leaving Irontown. And that one samurai leaving after witnessing Ashitaka kill his 3 comrades, he just nopes out of there. There's no doubt this film is monumental and has a lasting impact on so many, myself included. The connections to and inspiration drawn in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom from this film are quite evident. From Ashitaka's arm being damaged like Link's, the depiction of the world, even the little Kodama being as inspiration for the Koroks. Princess Mononoke is a fantastic film, and my current favorite Studio Ghibli film, for its music, themes, strong characters, story, and visuals. This movie means so much to me for so many reasons, and I'll cherish it for a long time to come. Whew! I am finally done with that. Oh my goodness, I am tired, but we made it! So, to recap, here is my personal ranking for the 10 Studio Ghibli films of Ghibli Fest 2023. My Neighbor Totoro, The Wind Rises, Ponyo, Howl's Moving Castle, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Porco Rosso, Castle in the Sky, Spirited Away, Kikis Delivery Service, and finally, Princess Mononoke. These movies, this studio, and animated works are so important to me. They always inspire me. They're reminders that art is beautiful, and these films always help me through tough times and always pump me up to make some art, to create something, to enjoy the process of creation. What are your thoughts? Do you agree or disagree with my placement? Do you agree or disagree with anything I said pertaining to the movies? Let me know in the comments. This video was a massive undertaking, and it was a ton of work, so I'd appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe, and share this around. I'd really appreciate it so much. While you're here, take a look at some of my other content. That's all for me. Thank you so much again for watching. Remember to always support animated movies, indie creators, and artists. Take care, and have yourself a damn good one. She knows she loves Porco and is excuse me.